Something weird happened the other day. The Supreme Court chose not to hear a legal case about mifepristone. In simpler terms, the GOP were trying to ban abortion pills in the US. The Supreme Court decided not to hear the case, but that doesn't mean that they ruled in favor of the FDA or people who want this, or people who want the medicine to be legalized and not forcefully taken off the books by forced birth representatives. And even a couple days ago, the Senate tried to push through a bill that would protect women's rights to IVF, in vitro fertilization. And Republicans completely blocked the bill. They stopped the bill from going into effect. How do we really get here? This has been a large effort, a concerted effort after Dobbs was done in. Now, you need to remember that the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade was something that the Republicans and conservatives at large in the country have been working towards for 50 years, ever since the court's been ruled on. It was the lawyers that helped win the election by forcing forcing the Florida government to throw away ballots for Al Gore in the Gore v. Bush election. Are some people who are sitting on the Supreme Court bench right now, getting their gift for helping take the election for Bush. One of those people is actually named Brett Kavanaugh, and lawyers being put up and kept in a rotation of people who have done good work for Republicans, being rewarded with going as far as possible to do what their clients want to be done, getting rewarded for their staunchness in their position with being on the Supreme Court. That's why many of the Supreme Court justices that Donald Trump put into office are there, and that's what they're doing. So after they finally got exactly what they want, after 50 years of toiling, they got exactly what they wanted. The Supreme Court to say that there is no fundamental right to end a pregnancy, period. And it's up to the states to decide when people are actually allowed to do that or not. And that is when something happened. Something quickly happened. And what that was trigger laws. Now, if you don't know what a trigger law is basically a law that's put into effect, but doesn't. A trigger law is a law that's written into effect. It's written on the books, but it's not enforceable yet. There's something external that needs to happen, and then the trigger law is then taken into effect. There was something like that in Arizona. Arizona actually had a trigger law, and that law was a 160-year-old ban on ending pregnancy that had been on the books ever since the state had been a state, and it's actually even before it's been a state. The Supreme Court of Arizona upheld that it is enforceable after Roe was struck down, specifically because there was no other law on the book overturning that law. And so it began one of the first, but not the only, points where the right to what you can do with a pregnancy was then instantly taken away from many people. And this one was a strict one. It was one of the strictest, actually. It was one of the strictest, actually, on the books. The only exception is the right to save the pregnant person's life, but not for assault and not for incest. All those things are fair game to the people who wrote this law. And you know what else was fair game? Apparently, 10-year-olds, because in this exact same sweep of laws that put the 160-year-old abortion law into effect was also Arizona's original age of consent, which put it at 10 years old, actually. 10 years old, which is, you know, I don't think we should be listening to those people exactly on their moral quandaries with this specific item, right? Very interesting stuff. So when this happened, obviously it started to get bad, because most people in this country at this moment in time, even though there are broad swaths of the country who have very strict and see sometimes middling views on abortion, in many states, the vast majority of people want it to be legal in some form, in some pretty reasonable form, right? Arizona is one of those states. And so when that happened, and the Republicans got exactly what they wanted, they started to scramble, realizing that this could mean a massive blowback for their goal of winning the 2024 election, which means that this could be a serious threat to them trying to win the 2024 election, because now they have to scramble to justify a law that they wanted in place, but almost all of their constituents absolutely hated. So the former governor of Arizona comes out and says, "Oh, I think it went too far. I don't really think that's a good idea." Sean Hannity completely switched his tune the second this happened because it looked so bad. It was a PR disaster for the Republicans.
And when it comes to right-wing media, second verse, same as the first.
There's nothing extreme about individual states regulating abortion. Supreme Court ruling was a momentous decision that returns abortion law back to the states where it belongs, to individual voters. You will now decide abortion law at the state level per the 10th Amendment of our Constitution. He rightly believes, if you believe in the Constitution, that it should be left up to the states and for the people in every state to decide. That is called, democracy. That is called states' rights, for example.
What about now?
But
fast forward.
After this,
now for an Arizona Supreme Court ruling that upholds what is a Civil War-era law banning abortion. This will be fixed in the next week or two. Let not your heart be troubled. I can pretty much assure that will happen. Trump opposes the law and this ruling.
Instantly comes out, whoa, what? Finally, there's nothing radical about our ideology. Oh, wait a second, that's a little too radical. This is going to be fixed instantly in the next week. It was not fixed instantly in the next week. Actually, they tried to fix it in the next week. But what happened was that the Republican legislature in Arizona voted to stop overturning that rule 3 times. Is it because they thought the rule was way too strict, or was it because they actually completely agree with the original writer's vision of a 11-year-old being assaulted and being forced to give birth to their assaulter's child? I personally don't. That child being forced to give birth to another child. I personally don't think so. I personally think that's more align with their beliefs than them thinking that this is some horrible law that shouldn't have been passed, because they specifically tried to keep it in the law when they had the opportunity to overturn it. So this got bad. Okay, a lot of people started to come out and say that they don't want this law on the books. They want their freedom to be able to choose when and where and how they have families, and not the state or a 160-year-old law to be able to choose that for them. When that happened, the woman running for Senate, yes, she's still trying to run for a seat somewhere in Arizona. She thinks she can get it somewhere in Arizona. Somewhere wants her to be representing them. I promise. The woman who's never polled well once in Arizona, Carrie Lake, actually had to flip-flop on this bill. It instantly came out and she was like, yes, this is so good. And then she realized that everybody hates it and she was like, wait, this is so bad. It was like days apart. One day she was brought onto a conservative station and she said, I completely support this bill. We're going to protect the rights. We're going to protect the rights of every unborn child in the country. And then she saw how bad the polling was. And I've never seen somebody change their tune faster than she did. Instantly flip-flops the second she finds any pushback and realizes nobody wants her draconian, disgusting theocratic laws on the books. But this isn't the only state where this happens. In other states, there are trigger laws as well. In Kentucky, we had a trigger law, if I remember correctly. In Georgia and other deep South states, they had trigger laws. In Texas, they definitely had a trigger law. Or in other places, they also passed bans in some capacity. A full ban, meaning that it is completely illegal, except for extringent circumstances, like you can definitely prove that you're almost about to die, or you can definitely prove that you were totally assaulted. And then there's 6-week, and that's in like Texas, Oklahoma, all these types of states. And then there's 6-week bans. That's in Florida, 12, 6-week bans, 12-week bans, and then 15 to 18-week bans as well in a large portion of the country, right? And there are a lot of problems with this, but we'll talk about them soon. One big problem is that these states already don't treat assault that well to begin with. So the fact that all these assault claims are sitting out there and is way more likely that they're not actually being taken seriously and don't actually make it to court. But now you think that you can make that a reason, the only reason for why you can get out of being forced to have a child by the state. I just don't think I don't really think that works. And I don't think it works either, right? And a lot of them also put in restrictions even when you can prove that you were assaulted, like waiting times as well. Or it's you can get out of it if you were assaulted, but in a specific time. And then they put a waiting period. So if you catch it late, then they force you to wait even longer to try to catch you so they can force you to give birth even more. It's really disgusting, this patchwork of ways that they would try to force women to give birth, because that's what this is about at the end of the day. I don't really like the whole like pro-life, pro-choice thing. It's about it's pro-choice and forced birth. It's those two things. The government forcing you to give birth or the government not forcing you to give birth. That's the only real options that they have. The whole thing about life is not really true, because conservatives don't really care about the life of children. They take food from the mouths of children constantly. All these same states voted to restrict summertime free food to children of low-income housing that the Biden administration wanted to put into effect because they don't care. Still talking about Arizona, though. Thankfully, their Democratic governor came out. Their Democratic governor and Democratic Attorney General said that even if this law is put on the books, they will not enforce it. A lot of conservatives got really angry when they heard this, that the Attorney General wouldn't force women in Arizona to give birth when they don't want to, when they were assaulted, or when or there was some other illegal act that was done to them that led to them getting pregnant. They got really angry with this, but this is an incredible thing for Mays. I watched Mays race when she was put in office, and it was a great job. She was running against, I forget his name. She was running against this far right weirdo that Charlie Kirk specifically pumped up, and he was specifically running just like Carrie Lake alongside to try to get the to try to hamstring any Democrats if they were put into office by invoking a super conservative, super stringent, and legally dubious ways to make the state worse. Thankfully, both lost. He was completely at a loss, and Arizona is far better of a state with a full slate of Democrats at the top of the ticket. I'm going to tell you that now, especially since all the conservatives tried to make sure. That forced birth would be the law of the state as much as they possibly could, until the pushback got so bad, until the campaigning got so bad, and the polling back got so bad that the fourth time that they tried to repeal the law, they finally got it done. They repealed the 1864 ban, but there was only one problem: there's only one problem left, is that per Arizona law, the law can't actually go into the repeal. It can't actually go into effect until the end of the until 90 days after the end of the legislative session. So what the conservatives are thinking about doing is constantly extending the end of the legislative session as far as possible to push back the repeal going into effect as far as possible, and then hoping that the abortion law would go into effect, and then try to sue all the way up to the Supreme Court to get Mays to forcefully drag women to jail when they want to end pregnancies when they are sick or something along those lines, right? That's their goal. But I'm not sure I don't think it's going to happen that way. It seems like it's going to be a zombie law, and then it's going to get destroyed. Thankfully. But that's not the end of it. That's where the story mostly ended in Arizona. but it picked up and it's running across the entire country from the head to the toes. We have an illness in our country, and that illness is radical religious zealotry that has been emboldened by Donald Trump's presidency to go as strict and as insane as possible on every law pertaining to and controlling and regulating the actions, the actions, activities, and choices women make, specific women and people who can give birth, that they can make regarding their reproductive process. Donald Trump, who's been actually pretty quiet on abortion, besides towing the I was the one who got a Dobbs overturned with putting so many conservatives on the Supreme Court. He hasn't really talked that much about abortion himself and what he plans to do. We know that what Donald Trump's plan is to be as pretty conservative as possible, but to lie about it on the campaign trail to not anger a lot of women voters. He privately, though, the New York Times got a scoop that he actually supports a 16-week ban. Now, why a 16-week ban? Because he's a child and he likes the idea of 16 weeks because, end quote, you know why I like 16? Mr. Trump told one of his people who was given anonymity to describe the conversation privately. It's even. It's 4 months. He likes 4 months. It's an even number. It's a cool number. 16. He just picked it out of thin air. Cool. 16. I'll take it. And so that's why he supports a 16-week ban. It sounds cool, right? Not a 15-week, a 16-week, because that's a Trump ban, right? That's what he says privately. In public, he likes to dodge the question constantly. Trump told advisors that he believes the decision was going to be harmful to the Republicans. First time I actually think Trump was right. Since then, he has formed the view that the abortion issue was overwhelmingly responsible for a string of Republican losses in congressional races. Once again, that's incredibly true. Democrats weren't polling necessarily that well before Dobbs. Post Dobbs, though, they got a massive bump and almost won the House. And the only reason why they didn't is because New Yorkers are stupid, and the New York legislation is stupid, and they put in a Republican-friendly map for no good reason, just because they're stupid people with stupid decisions who make stupid decisions. That's actually the reason why Democrats aren't in the a majority in the House right now. It's, once again, stupid. Never trust New Yorkers, okay? I hate them people. In Texas, state courts have ruled that women did not qualify for limited exceptions for life-threatening conditions related to pregnancy, even in cases where their fetus faced severe diagnosis and the woman's future fertility and health were jeopardized. So this is why conservatives lie constantly and like to try to soothe the conversation by saying, oh, there's going to be exceptions. There's definitely going to be exceptions. It's not like you can just claim the exception and then you can get abortion. There has to be checks on checks on checks, and then it can be up to the individual who's going through that, or like the police, or then you can get sued still and you can go to court. Even though anyways, you'll have the government breathing down your neck, and then you have to have some bureaucrat. You need to have a bureaucrat sign off on whether or not they think you have a valid reason to not die. And so obviously there's going to be people who have incredibly life-threatening conditions, people who have very serious conditions that can deteriorate quickly, but because the state decided to hop in and decide for other people whether or not, when you're in a deadly situation, if you are qualified for life-saving medical treatment. Just imagine that. Like, you get into a car crash, your car is on fire, you have a massive gash in your head, 90% of your ribs are broken, and the paramedics pull up to the scene, and they have to send an email to your local congressperson for that of your condition to sign off on whether or not they could put you in the ambulance and take you to the hospital. And now we're starting to understand that the idea of there's going to be exceptions starts to kind of fall apart when you finally think about it, right? What's probably more likely to happen is that people are going to start to wonder whether or not they want to be liable to be sued for for taking care of people's lives simply because some religious extremist decides that your life is not worth being free because you decided to help another person save theirs, right? And that is how you scare, doctors from not doing these procedures and leaving the state, making it even harder for people to seek this care when they need it. Trump, who described himself as supportive of abortion rights for most of his life, announced in early 2011 that he considered running for president as a Republican, and now he just became anti-abortion. I don't really think he has many opinions on this, actually. I think he mostly says what he thinks people are going to want to hear, and he's flip-flopped on this idea constantly. Speaking of that, in January, he went on a Fox News town hall, and he's been facing a lot of pushback by like really hardline religious extremist conservatives. And he's not a religious guy. He holds the Bible upside down on accident. He doesn't have any. He's never really gone to church. He doesn't know any like real Bible verses or anything. He's not a religious guy. All right. He cheated on his wife multiple times. He's friends with Epstein. Okay. He's not a serious guy. He's not a seriously religious guy. Let's not be stupid. But like a religious extremist came up to him and said, reassure me. An abortion extremist came up and said, reassure me that you would protect every person's right to life without compromise. And Donald Trump was like, yeah, I can't do that. Nah. I love where you're coming from, but we still got elections to win. So let's kind of cool it on the whole right to life thing. Because here's the thing, when you frame it as right to life, right? When you start to frame it as right to life, and you think a zygote from the moment that it becomes a single-celled organism, a zygote in the uterus is now a living person. And the death of that is the death of those cells is now a murder, right? Obviously, you can no longer have a nuanced position on this topic because now you have to admit that you can murder something that's done nothing wrong and is just kind of chilling because you just like feel like it. There's like cool murder, right? If you think of it like that, then obviously you would come to this extreme position that like forced birth needs to happen no matter what, even in the case of assault, even in the case of incest, even in the case of like it being a child. It does not matter. It shouldn't matter to their political philosophy. They like to make excuses because they want to win and they like money. But outside of that, they sell their own. But outside of that, they sell their own political philosophy here as nothing more than a tool to get votes and not an actual moral philosophy here. That's the problem. And honestly, a lot of these extreme forced birth conservative organizations around the country have really started to understand that. License to Kill. Anti-abortion groups rage against the GOP. Some groups are running ads against long-standing GOP allies that use the same graphic imagery, blood, babies, and scalpels. They have long deployed to oppose Democrats and the abortion rights movement. So obviously, the fight when it comes to pregnancy and reproductive rights did not stop when it came to abortion. Obviously, it would never stop when it came to abortion because there's other ways to end pregnancy. Obviously, it would expand, and there's other ways to start pregnancy as well. These same people came out against IVF and other medicines like mifepristone, which is a medicine used to end pregnancy instead of a surgical procedure. And also they came out against birth control as well. And these are the same people who've had a undertone of being anti-contraceptive as well. All of these forces are now emboldened by Dobbs being overturned, by the history of Donald Trump's presidency. All of these people have been pushed up and now find themselves at the precipice of being able to have their dreams. A society where women's reproductive rights are completely overturned. A society where reproductive rights of every person is controlled strictly by the state. What, do you need to go? Isn't that argument a tad bit disingenuous, considering conservatives being heavy on self-defense? Do you think they feel it as as fundamentally different? I would need you to explain a little bit more. For a group of people who tout individual freedoms, they don't really care about women's individual freedoms. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's really important. Conservatives lie about the idea of like individual freedom. They don't really believe in individual freedoms. Conservatism and conservatives are heavy on regulating people's individual rights and freedoms and what they do in their spare time. Conservatives want a large government, a government so big and overpowering that it's a part of every aspect of your life, whether it's who you can marry when you're a consenting adult, to who you can have kids with, two completely consenting adults, as well. Who, if you want kids or not, what you can do when it comes to a pregnancy, how you raise your kids as well. Like they absolutely don't care about individual freedoms. They never have. They care about, here's the thing, okay? They care about one individual freedom. They care about the freedom to take away other people's freedom. That's what they care about. That's what they're enforcing. Is they're like freedom for states to make their, because they talk about the idea that states need to be free to make their own decisions, while all of their top running politicians are running on national bills to ban abortion and in other reproductive aspects of people's lives on a national level, and incredibly strictly as well, that would overturn other states that have more lax laws. They don't care. It's a lie. It's a front. It's a lie. It's a front. To be able to get sympathy and support while pretending that they're more moderate, while in all actuality being far more extreme than they could have gotten elected on. In the context of murder is never good, the idea that murder is never good when they feel it's necessary to defend yourself and property. Well, here's the thing, okay? Their position, you got to remember, their position is a zygote is a baby, okay? The second a sperm enters an egg, that's a baby, a human life, and has the same exact human rights as you and I, okay? And so if you believe that, then all of these other arguments that they're saying follow, as long as they're as strict as possible. They all follow. They're not wrong. They're not like they don't not make any sense. Being less strict doesn't make any sense, because that's when you're making concessions to this idea that, oh, now we can find reasons to kill someone, because we can find reasons to kill someone, we can find reasons to end another person's life that wouldn't hold for any other person except for this, what they call a person in like incubating inside of another person's body, right? Which is crazy because they also hate big government. No, listen, they say they hate big government. Conservatives love big government. Conservatives love big government. They want the government to be in your bedroom, your bathroom, your doctor's room, like in your head, everywhere. Conservatives want government to be everywhere to control culture and thought and actions of the populace, so they act in ways that that conservatives approve of. And also conservatives, I mean, I wouldn't say that their like moral philosophy or axiom or whatever revolves around the idea that murder is never good. They also love murder. Calvin Coolidge was the last Republican that reduced the deficit. Yeah, it ain't good. It ain't good. They love big government. So basically what a lot of conservatives are facing now is the extremist wing of their base being emboldened and now pushing for exactly what they want: the complete shutdown of reproductive rights across the country, because they believe that reproductive rights is basically one of the keys to society. But I want to talk about that here in a moment. Remember that, okay? It's not just people on the fringe. There are very large groups. The largest Christian group in the entire country, the Southern Baptists, they came out against IVF, in vitro fertilization. They are skeptical about birth control. They're skeptical about contraceptives. All these people want a very strict religious theocratic rules pertaining to sexual behavior across the entire country. Now I want to take you through a little kind of touch on what's happening in some of these states. In Florida, they passed a 6-week abortion ban, one of the strictest in the country. And so I want to take you through this little article that talks about inside the first months of Florida's ban, because I thought it was quite interesting. People who got turned away are in shock. They say, I have to go home and have a baby now, when they didn't even want to have a baby in the first place. In the first 20 days of the ban, Di says her clinic had to turn away around 75% of her patients. People would cry, they would break down, they wouldn't know what to do. Sounds exactly what a normal human being would do when when their government tells them that they're forced to give birth, forced to do a life-threatening action because they just feel like they shouldn't be allowed to not. We've had a lot of patients who know about the law and come in early, but it's so early because they tested positive that we can't do anything. Because they tested positive, we can't see anything in them, and we have to send them home. Di says, in Florida, patients seeking an abortion, seeking to end a pregnancy, are required to get an ultrasound first for no reason. It's simply to slow down the process of ending a pregnancy purposefully. According to Guttmacher Institute, the Cleveland Clinic notes that an embryo can be detected via ultrasound as early as 6 weeks, meaning earlier ultrasounds might miss it. So they originally set their ban at 6 weeks, meaning that they say that you could end the pregnancy, but to end the pregnancy, they need to be able to see the embryo. But they said it so that the doctors can't see the embryo by the time they're forced to. They can't see the embryo until the ban catches up. So now they can't actually stop the pregnancy because the law is now stopping them from doing so. And they did that purposefully. They did it purposefully to slow down the process as much as possible and make it almost impossible, while trying to maintain some sort of innocence in the process, saying that there is an out. While they're constantly like boarding up the doors like they're playing zombies, right? And that's what's going on here. They have to secure childcare. They have to secure travel. They have to secure lodging. There's lots more cost that goes into it, Kay says. It's not a simple flight. I was helping a caller earlier today, and there were no nonstop flights from her area. And so basically they were talking about how there are services now that help people who need to escape slowly turning conservative theocracy states to be able to end pregnancies if they feel like their life is in danger, if they can't take care of the child, if for whatever reason that they would want to, these states stop them, and so they need to be able to escape those states. And it's been difficult because of other laws that they're putting in on the books. And once again, this is purposeful. Here's a Republican congressperson coming out in support of, remember, this is the freedom. These people are supposed to be all about freedom. Stop trying to track down and stop people from leaving their state to be able to get care when their state forces them to give birth.
Our work as a pro-life movement is far from over. If a young lady can hop in a car in Fort Wayne and in an hour and a half she can be in a place in Michigan, or in just under 3 hours she could cross the line into Illinois and achieve what she was able to do with abortion clinics here in Indiana, the fight is far from over.
That's exactly right. And I'm for federal legislation. I'm for stronger laws at the state levels, whatever we can do to save lives, to protect babies. That's what this fight is all about.
Our work.
All right, so there you have it from straight from their mouths. They want to, and this is something that they've been doing, right? It's kind of like fugitive slave laws, right? It's something that conservatives have been cooking up for hundreds of years. So this isn't new to them. Okay, they're an old man in this game. What their plan is to pass laws that make it illegal to travel from one state to another state. So if you come back, they want to be able to arrest you for something you did in another state that's illegal in the state that you left, to be able to try to stop people from leaving. So much for freedom. You can't even go to you can't even exercise your freedom somewhere else. They still want to have control over you, even if you're out of their jurisdiction. They want to make it illegal to traffic somebody, to help drive somebody, to assist somebody who's trying to leave the state as well, putting massive fines and the possibility of jail time on those people as well. It is purposeful. It is purposeful. This is not a game that they're playing. All right, and they're being very serious about it. They want to control every aspect of. They want to control every aspect of reproductive life of every human in this country. Alabama's highest court even ruled that embryos are people. This is a story that you might have heard of. It happened earlier this year. But basically what happened is that a challenge went all the way, a challenge to what is a human went all the way up to the Alabama Supreme Court. Basically what it was about is that an in vitro fertilization, an embryo freezing facility, mishandled embryos, okay? And when they mishandled those embryos, they died. And so the owners of those embryos, the parents, right, the would-be parents, said that it was child endangerment and wrongful death. That was the lawsuit, right? But they claimed that those embryos weren't people. Now, obviously, by conservative logic, obviously those embryos were exactly people. And that's why they ruled that they could be judged as people. And if a embryo just dies, it should be treated in the law no different than a child dying in your daycare, right? It should be treated no different than like a drunk driving accident. It should be treated no different because apparently it's a person. So if something like this happens, that's why you need to be held to the highest court of law, highest standard on murder charges. And that's happening in some states like Texas when people have miscarriages as well. You can be charged with murder. Ohio had a large case with this, with a 10-year-old being. Remember Arizona's law where they set the age of consent at 10. There was a 10-year-old in Ohio who had to go to another state because Ohio's laws were so strict, and a baby was being forced to have a baby because conservatives think that's the only morally righteous thing to do in that situation. I think it's sick, in my personal opinion. I personally think it's sick, and a lot of people around this country think it's sick too. But I wanted to talk about a little something, okay? What's going on? What's happening? What's up with these people? Why are they doing this? Because I think a lot of people, when we talk about this issue, they give the correct answer for why it's happening, but they don't really elaborate on it anymore. And I think that's important. So why are they doing this? The answer is control. They say control women. I think they're trying to control everybody. But why? Why are they trying to control everybody? Why are they trying to control reproductive rights in the way in which we engage with each other? And I want you to take a look at this. It might be something that you've seen before, but it's been passed around a lot. Conservatives definitely use this a lot, and this explains almost everything. This is a map of if only one certain demographic voted in each state. White men, if only white men voted, almost the entire country would be red. Non-college educated, college educated, white women here, men, but women in general. If you take a look at this one, women in general, if they voted just with their just them, the country would be mostly blue, vastly blue, overwhelmingly blue, right? And so here's the reason. Because women, when given rights, don't usually act in accordance to how conservative, specifically religious men want them to act for control. There's a reason why conservatives are starting to come out and start to give more credence to the idea of overturning the 19th Amendment, the amendment that gave women the right to vote. There's a reason why there was a large concerted effort amongst conservatives to stop women from being able to get credit cards. There's a reason why there's a movement in this country to stop women from being able to claim no-fault divorce. All right, there's a reason, right? Because when women are given rights and power, now they don't have to be forced socially or legally into abiding by a lot of rules that a lot of rules of society that benefit these usually white conservative Christian men. That is why, right? They're allowed to leave relationships without the man's consent. They're able to have an end a pregnancy without a man's consent. They're able to do lots of things and no longer be forced to be tied to a guy to be able to live in society and live a normal life. That's obviously a problem. When you, for one, are conservative and you want women to abide by a certain standard, and two, are super religious, and the hyper religiosity and the structure of a family that you're supposed to be building makes women subservient. That's a large reason for why this is happening, and why it didn't end at. There's a large reason for why it's happening and why it didn't end at abortion. Elon Musk came out with propaganda against birth control. Hormonal birth control makes you fat, doubles the risk of depression, and triples your suicide risk. There's a clear scientific consensus, but very few people seem to know. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you're a girl who went to go get birth control, you definitely know. The doctors definitely tell you. They 100% tell you. A lot of women can't even get a hysterectomy before a certain age, and even if they want to, and they're old enough, they have like a husband or a boyfriend or something, many doctors may still turn them down simply because they need like a man's approval. Like the likelihood that you're on birth control and you don't know any risk to the medicine is just completely ridiculous. But obviously they're going to come out against it because women having agency themselves and getting to control themselves. Women having agency over themselves and being able to control themselves only spells doom for these types of guys because they won't be subservient to an idealistic lifestyle that they want them to be. They're not easily moldable and controllable. So that makes, so it's a problem, right? It becomes a huge issue. Women voting more. There's a reason why they come out against women when they vote, especially more Democratic, when they use birth control to take agency over whether or not they get pregnant. They can stop taking birth control and want to get pregnant, or stay on birth control and not have a higher likelihood of not getting pregnant. Right? They're starting to become people and less property. And I know that sounds just a little bit hyperbolic, but how else are you going to describe this massive amounts of control around one of like half of the population? Okay. And another reason is because these people definitely view women in two ways: as property, but property that's essential to the survival of the country and the continuation of ethnicities and bloodlines and countries. Women don't build countries. They don't maintain countries. They don't fight for countries. They don't get the degrees that keep the country going. Right. And they shit on like a lot of housework. Right. But they also are supposed to be the life givers that are the ones that keep societies, ethnicities, bloodlines, names going. Right, without a woman being able to be there, who can get pregnant and can and chooses to get pregnant, or is made pregnant and gives birth, it's very hard to be able to. It's very hard to be able to continue a society. I'm going to tell you that right now. And it's more likely that women are going to be picky and choosy about how that happens because a whole human comes out of them and it can kill them instantly. Right? Obviously, you would want to be a little bit more picky about who you do that with and how many times you do it. But that's not really necessarily of a concern to these people. They're not women, for one, and they have another role. They have another role for society as well. Women are the key. That's why Elon Musk specifically has. We talked about it. That's why Elon Musk has so many baby mamas. That's why he's impregnating as many women as possible. He wants. Like the goal is for women to pump out as many babies as humanly possible. There's this weird movement in the conservative sphere right now about like outbreeding liberals. How they've been trying to push young girls to get married as soon as possible and get pregnant as soon as possible as well, and get pregnant as many times as possible to be able to pump out as many children as possible to outbreed the left. How They want to make so many spawn and pump out so many kids that the whole country will shift to the right. But they need women to do that. A lot of men are in those conservative spaces, absolutely believing that, but not as many women sign on to that. And women having the ability to divorce them, go on birth control, get an abortion, end a pregnancy. Be able to choose not to be with them, it not being necessary financially, socially, legally to be indebted, controlled, and under the dominion of them, is a huge problem when it comes to that specific aim and goal. There's a reason why they always say that there's a reason why in a lot of these circles, the idea that Rome fell because women finally started to get more rights, and then the stupid emotional woman brain led to stopped the smart, logical, good boy brain from being able to single-handedly drive the country drive the kingdom or whatever in a positive way. And now they credit, and many of them like to now credit women for the fall of Rome and fall of nations. Many of them say that women's rights come right before a nation crumbles to the ground. Women being able to make their own choices is always detrimental to conservatives. That's why they always. Rufio, this is the guy that coined the term a CRT and DEI, right? This is the mastermind behind those things being in the conservative lexicon. Replying to somebody talking about birth control. So what? The pill causes health problems for many women. Recreational sex is a large part of the reason why we have so many single mother households, which drives poverty, crime, and dysfunction. The point of sex is to create children. This is natural, normal, and good. So if you see here, I want to take a look at basically this part here. Okay, so this is exactly what I was talking about. Women's reproductive freedom is a massive issue. When women are able to make their own choices, they become single mothers. They drive poverty. They make crime. They drive societal dysfunction. If they are not controlled and stringently, then their decisions to be flippant with their uterus will drive the entire society into the ground. So they must be controlled. They must be controlled. A woman's uterus must be more controlled than a gun. Like recreational sex never existed. It's not about it not existing. They hate it. They hate it. They hate women's rights. They hate them being able to make their own choices like this. Obviously, right? Yeah, it prevents births. Yeah, they wouldn't be single mothers. Listen, they wouldn't be single mothers if they would be able to get like the pill, right? And get on birth control. Like obviously they wouldn't be single mothers then, would they? I mean, remember that massive screed that what's his name? Stefan Molyneux went on that like women make assholes. Women have babies with assholes and then come out with asshole babies that make the world worse. We have all these terrible men because women won't make good choices. And so women need to be stopped from making choices because they don't make good choices. See, these conservatives. The Heritage Foundation. This is the group that actually wrote Project 2025. That massive list about how they want to control all aspects of American society through a hyper-religious, theocratic, conservative Christian lens as much as possible. It seems to me that a good place to start would be a feminist movement against the pill and for returning the consequentiality to sex. Conservatives have to lead the way to restoring sex to its true purpose. So you want to take a look at this? Feminist movement, start with a feminist movement against the pill for returning the consequentiality of sex. So you know what this means. Let me write this for you in a way that, in the way they really mean it. Women have to be punished for having sex by being forced to give birth. You being turned away at the abortion clinic for trying to get an abortion is punishment to you for being so flippant and irresponsible. You need to suffer consequences for your actions because sex is really important and you not handling it well is consequential and you deserve what you get. Return the consequentiality of sex. the consequentiality is still there. Getting the possibility of getting pregnant, right? And also these people think that like an abortion is just like a checkup or something. It's like a checkup. It's like, I don't know, taking some Tylenol, like the flu or something. It's way more intensive. It can be more problematic. A lot of things go into it. You can't just, even if you just take the pill, a lot of hormonal issues come with that as well. It's not like they necessarily care that much. It's not like they really care. But this is what it's about. It's all about this type of stuff. They say it themselves, right? Why can't we talk about how the birth control pill is harming women? A thought-provoking take, right? And then Elon Musk is like, you can now. So it's not about abortion. It's not about the pill. It's about everything. Women are at the center of everything. Women, to these people, to a hardline Christian conservative, a Christian theocrat, Christian nationalist, a religious extremist in this country, women are at the center of society and also a piece of property that must be controlled, else society crumbles. And so they chalk, and that's why they're so hard on things like feminism, women's rights movements, right? They're skeptical now the right to vote and any aspect that a woman can take outside of the natural flow of things, which is like usually a man controlling how, when, and where a woman can, or a woman or anybody who can get pregnant gets pregnant. Their control over that has led to all the problems in society. Women and their irrational voting has led to Democrats destroying the economy, let migrants and terrorists into our borders. It's the housing problem. It's the poverty problem. It's the crime problem. It's every problem, right? It's now like it's like trans people, it's black people, it's the whole thing. It all starts in the womb of a woman. And so obviously, if they believe that, why not go straight to the source and put a padlock on it and hide the key? And once you start to understand that, everything that follows from that starts to make perfect sense. Everything that follows from that line makes perfect sense. When you finally start to understand that conservatives believe that every ill in society starts from a uterus, obviously that uterus is now subject to control, to domination, to regulation. Because if not, society will crumble. It has to happen. And so that's why the ways in which you can get out of the consequences of having sex with them needs to be diminished. It's not only religious. There is a secular a point to it as well, because not everybody who's like super abortion extremist on this position are also very they're not always super religious when it comes to even like condoms as well. The only reason for why you should be having sex is to be able to pump out a bunch of babies, and that baby making factory needs to have some security guards in it, right? You wouldn't just keep your factory open and the doors unlocked anytime you're not using it, right? So obviously you put on locks and you put down a security camera and you hire a security detail and you put up a fence and you get some guard dogs. Because that little organ, that tiny little organ in the abdomen of a woman, usually, is where all problems and all good things in society begins. So that's why they want to control it. And that's why they're so radical about it.